Why should we care about where the world is going when we can't do anything about it? Welcome to the relaunch of the Lost and Searching podcast, the show where we sit down with incredible people to get real deep, real quickly, and help us discover and cultivate the leader that we are all meant to be more of. This is a solo episode to talk about 7 things that I have learned in 34 episodes of podcasting, although realistically it's more than that, but that's where we are. This is episode 35. There's a tone shift. You see, when I first started this show, I wanted it to be about discovering what it really means to be a leader. But I figured out pretty quickly that I'm not interested in leadership. I'm interested in you, in human-to-human connections, and in the human condition and the journey of life that all of us human beings are on. And then I also realized that I kind of had my answer, that I figured out that we are all leaders, and that it's really just about how we be more of that leader more often. And we'll cover that later. But I wanted to use this opportunity to reflect on 7 big questions and the learnings from the answering those questions that I have discovered, figured out, felt, experienced as a result of this podcast so far. And we're 35 episodes in. Here's to the next 350 plus. So let's get into it. And so to answer that first question, why should we care? This is really talking about apathy. I've talked to a lot of my guests about their experience of receiving apathy from other people. The noise on the internet, wars we feel like we can't do anything about, climate change which we feel like we can't do anything about. There's so much noisy content online. Everyone has their opinion. What can we do? We're teeny tiny ants, so why care? Well, the answer for me has become because it's something. And you go, something isn't very good, something's kind of crap, it's kind of boring. Well, we have this rare gift to use the life that we have to do something. So why not? As someone who has experienced in my youth, through most of my life, a lot of suicidal ideation, a lot of self-harm thoughts and challenges, intense depression, intense anxiety, and wondering why am I here and what's the point of it all? I've come to the conclusion, now really loving being alive despite how challenging things are, that if I'm here, I may as well be here. We don't know what waits us when we're not here anymore. We don't know for a fact in the traditional sense or our current modern sense of the word fact what happens after we die. Spiritually speaking, and I have become a fairly spiritual person, and more spiritual conversations will be happening on this show. Spiritually speaking, our soul is inhabiting this body for the sake of experiencing what it's like to be human for some reason. And faith is going, I don't know. I don't need to know. I don't care about the truth. I'm interested in pointers towards truths that allow us all to live more of this experience because we can, because we're here. You can either choose to cry about it, or you can choose to play the infinite game of life. And the choice I've made and why I'm here is because maybe we can all play that game together a little bit better. Maybe this is me playing my game. Maybe this is me helping you play yours. My purpose has become to help people discover and cultivate the version of themselves, the leader that they are, that they were always meant to be more of, so that you can change your life for the better, to create the life and the world resulting from that life that you most want to see. So strap in, baby. Question 2, podcasting is so saturated. Is it worth doing? So very often when speaking to entrepreneurs, because a large chunk of my career has been in the entrepreneurship industry, space, ecosystem, in the UK especially, you'll get someone starting a podcast because they think it's a good marketing tool, and not realizing that a podcast is its own separate product. And like any product, it needs to be marketed. So they fall into the trap accidentally of needing to market the marketing tool, which doesn't make sense. So as a result, you have a lot of crap podcasts out there. You have a lot that don't really know what they're doing or why. They're not hosted by people who are really good hosts. They're not people who are meant to be hosting. And then there are a lot of people that try to use it as supplements to their work. They're coaches. And a huge number of life coaches have podcasts, and they're fucking boring because that person's a good coach and they therefore know how to ask questions in a coaching conversation, maybe even aren't actually very good at that. They think that just because that's the case, they're also able to host a podcast show. But it's called a show for a reason. These aren't interviews, they're conversations. Why? Because it's in that conversational flow space that real ideas are shared, and that is a cultivated, intentional space that must be created. So should you start a podcast because it's so saturated? Is it worth doing? Well, I think that personally, there are 3 conditions under which it's worthwhile to start a podcast. Number 1 is you're an amazing host. It's genuinely a skill set that speaks to you. For me, that's what it was, or that's one of the reasons. That's the main one. I love doing it, and I can get valuable results from it. I have chosen one of the hardest niches, which is one of the most oversaturated niches, which is personal development. This space and the kind of conversations we have on here are so broad that anyone could be listening. But with every area of business, when anyone could be listening, the real question becomes, why should anyone listen? Because I'm not speaking specifically to you, because I haven't gotten really specific about your pain points. Being human is not considered a specific enough pain point usually. Well, that's the place I'm in, and so I have a harder uphill battle. But I love what I do, and I'm really, really good at the hosting part, not to humble brag. This is feedback I've received from you, the listener, and really importantly from my guests. So condition number 1 is if you're a great host and it's really up your skills and you're really valuable using those skills. Number 2 is if you are doing some kind of podcast for a business reason, make sure it's really, really niche. It doesn't matter if you only have 500 listeners a week, if all 500 are your target customer and it really speaks to them. This is important. Most people, they just kind of pray and spray, but that's one of the reasons why it's so saturated. There are a lot of crap hosts out there, and there are a lot of podcasts that haven't defined themselves out there. I've defined myself, but it's quite broad. I must step up for other reasons. And if it's a business reason, you have to be super, super niche. Otherwise, it's not going to work for you. But if you can get hyper-targeted about the target customer, then marketing the marketing tool isn't that big a deal. And only having 500 listens a week isn't that big a deal because all 500 are people that will genuinely buy from you. So hyper-niche is reason number 2. And reason number 3 is because you love the conversation. If you're a mediocre host in a mediocre niche, but you love the conversation and you're willing to stick with it for the long term, not really seeing any results, then it might be worth it for you. Now, most people don't fall into this category. I kind of do, but I'm more doing it for the value and the impact, more of that point number 1. But too many people don't fall strongly enough into any one, let alone multiple of these categories, and it just becomes a big fat waste of time. As a result, something like 90% of podcasts go unlistened to, or they just sit on RSS feeds and they've finished now. I think the average or the top 10 percentile of podcast listeners or podcasts get something like 3,000 listens a week, which isn't very much because most get very, very few. Now, my feeling about this and my sentiment from the ecosystem is that the podcasting space is a little bit like YouTube was like a decade ago, which is to say that it's got loads of room for growth. And you could start on YouTube today. Are you considered a bit late? Kind of, but depending on your goals, it's not considered too late. You have the right strategy, if you know what you're doing, if you're still consistent, it's still a fine time to start. So technically, we're probably early to the podcasting scene. It's just that because there's so much other content out there already, you have to be you have to have a good enough reason. You have to be in one of those three buckets, at least one, for it to be worth bothering. That just means if you're not sure which one you're in, either it's not for you, or you got to set a clear enough purpose towards that. Otherwise, you end up becoming part of the noise and just wasting everybody's time, especially your own, because this takes a lot of time. It can be tough. Okay, question number 3. How do you deal with the emotional impact of slow growth? Coming off the back of the last question, one of the reasons it feels saturated is because it's slow to grow. It's hard to prove you're worth listening to because you're asking for a lot of people's time. Now my episodes are pretty consistently going to be just over an hour, right? Give or take, mostly going to be an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. I love super long form Joe Rogan or Modern Wisdom or Diary of a CEO 2.5 hour episodes. But the problem is when no one knows who I am, that's a lot of trust. So I need to build up trust, but even an hour is a lot of trust to build up. So what do you do about that? Well, you've got to do the marketing thing, and you've got to be able to deal with slow growth. So how do you deal with the emotional impact of that slow growth? No one cares anyway. You may as well do it. And there's the manifestation principle of if this is what you're meant to be doing. So if you fit into one of those 3 buckets and you keep going, eventually you're giving the universe the opportunity to bring things to you. If I keep going, if I keep posting the social media clips, growth might be slow, but you'd be surprised what comes up. You need to give the universe opportunities to give you opportunities back. There is a non-zero chance of growth if I keep going. And if I love what I'm doing, and that's why I'm doing it, and I can apply the business context to be able to deal with that growth and find it an exciting game to play, then the context changes. And I think this is really what it's about. It's like the mindset of the infinite game. This book's actually up behind me, and I reference it on the show a lot. I teach it in workshops. The infinite game, the infinite mindset that this is a never-ending game that you'll be playing your entire life. Is that a game you want to be playing? The game of growth, the game of understanding the audience, the game of understanding the industry. If the answer is no, then this isn't for you. But if the answer is yes, then you can find excitement in playing the game, even if the results from the game are taking a while. But if you're only looking at external, physical, material, monetary results, it's gonna be tough to deal with that emotional part. You can build emotional resilience, but personally, that's not what works for me in this context, and it's not what I recommend because it's gonna be a slow burn no matter what. It's just how slow. And part of the game is figuring out how to speed it up, but still being okay and having your bar low in terms of expectations for how slow. Okay, question 4. What does self-leadership mean? I briefly mentioned at the beginning that I have now come up with my definition of what it means to be a leader. So a little bit of a story. I actually came up with the idea for this podcast back in 2021. God, see, talking consistency, I wish I had continued it the entire time from 2021 until now. Imagine 4 more years of episodes. But anyway, I originally called the show The Mindful Leader because mindfulness and mental health and leadership was the intersection I was interested in. Season 2, I pivoted into calling it Lost and Searching. Then I quit for like 4 years because I didn't believe in myself and came back to it with the title of Lost and Searching. Now, Lost and Searching was still looking at that leadership element. If you go back and find our old stuff, you'll see a lot of leadership stuff. We want to figure out what it really means to be a leader. But like I mentioned at the beginning, I kind of figured out what my answer was, which is that we are all leaders. So let me give you this example. Most people would say, I'm a good person. They are good people. If I ask you, are you a good person? You'll probably say, yeah, I'm a good person. If I say, okay, then what if you're having an off day and you get really mean? You're a total dick to me. You're angry and you snap at me and you're just being a horrible person. Does that mean you're a bad person? Or are you just not acting in that moment like the good person that you are? This is the part that matters. What are you intrinsically versus what do you act like? I think being a leader, being the you that you're most meant to be, is exactly the same. I think we're all leaders. All of us are leaders because the person we are deep down, the wisest, higher version of ourselves, is intrinsically a leader. You are the leader of your life. This isn't about leadership titles. It is about being a leader. The qualities, the verb of action, of actively showing up and being that person. But how often do you do that? Is your default mode, your default state, one of unconsciousness? If it is, if it's a natural place of unconsciousness, then the best you're going to be able to get is the occasional flash of that person you're most meant to be. Well, how do we be that person more often? That's what I'm now interested in. That's why we're talking about psychology, philosophy, spirituality, all elements of science, politics. Anything to do with the human condition is now going to be discussed on this show. This is why. Because the journey of life is multifaceted. It's to do with yourself and your relationship with yourself, with others, and the love you have for life, the emotional state you're in, the mental patterns that creep in and pretend that they are you, the fear you live in, the love that you live in. This is the human experience. And depending on how you play that and how you see that, how you understand that, how you choose to live each and every day, the verbiage, okay, the action word, the being the leader that you are and how, that's what matters. It's not about titles or anything like that. And a lot of the time to do that, we're feeling lost. We're searching for answers to something, and to navigate out of that fog into the true self that you are deep down, that's what the show is now doing. So in short, self-leadership is your ability to be that person for you so that it can come out into the rest of the world and you can build the life that you want. Okay, question number 5. What is society lacking the most of that we need most, in your opinion? So what do we need more of in society? A story I've been telling a lot recently, or more like phrasing than a story, is that one might say that we operate, or that everything, every emotional feeling, every emotional state, every experience is at its root one of two things: love or fear. Most of us live in a fear state. And a fear state is anything that is survival mode. Now, survival mode is any emotional experience that exists just to keep your physical body alive, okay? So that includes fear, but also anger, stress, hatred, ego, lust, depression, and sadness, anxiety. These things exist to keep your physical body alive, moving through the world, whether it's dealing with emotions, taking action, processing emotions, spurring you into something, helping you, forcing you to reproduce. It keeps the human race alive physically. Okay, cool. So we've got that, and now we have the alternative, which is love, which is firmly in what we would call creation mode instead. Joe Dispenza outlines this brilliantly. You move from survival mode into creation mode by moving from survival states, those emotions I just mentioned, into feelings like love, wholeness, gratitude, excitement. And this is really important because once we understand what we're feeling, we can reverse engineer almost. We can identify where we're currently living and where we want to live instead. I don't mean physically, we mean internally. So are we currently living in fear or in love? To answer the question, what do people most need? Talking to people from all kinds of backgrounds, all walks of life, and only just getting started, I have such a strong sense that we have so much understanding and intelligence and acknowledgement of our responsibilities, and that the problem isn't knowledge, it's application of knowledge. Application of what knowledge? The knowledge of how to love. To move from fear into love, to move from survival into creation. If we had the practical knowledge, the practical experience and understanding, the application of the knowledge, to live in that, I think our world would be a very beautiful place. And I'm hoping we can do a lot more of that through this podcast, bring out more of that, understand more of that, and move through that together. That's kind of the undertone of the point of this show. How do you do something so much bigger than you with no budget? So in other words, how am I building this podcast that I have this vision for that is so much bigger than me, as much as possible, as quickly as possible, despite what I said earlier about the slow growth? How do you deal with when you've got no budget? Well, look, I'm actually writing something on my Substack at the moment as a collaborative piece. So 7jacobs.substack.com to follow along for that when it gets released. It might already be released by the time this video goes out, but having worked in the entrepreneurship space, I have this concept, this unwavering belief that you can do anything scrappy. Anything, right? Now, depending on what the thing is, depends on how challenging it is. But like this podcast is recorded with two, admittedly higher end, but still just two mobile phones, 100 pounds or dollars worth of microphones, two 15-pound tripod stands, and one, which is right over here off camera, one ring light. Look, it's not a perfect setup. I use free spaces, friends who have office spaces who will book me meeting rooms, or free meeting rooms I can book in places, or at my flat here, although I'm not doing that too much right this second because it's kind of a boring set. It makes for a boring set, but you can find a scrappy way of doing stuff. You can make a bit of money on the side, have a little bit of a budget at the start, and get really good at the skills you need to get good at, do them yourself, until you make just enough money to hire out just enough other people, to refocus just enough of your other time, to grow just a bit enough more, to reach just enough of the next milestone. there's anything you can do scrappy. I've seen entrepreneurs do some really scrappy things. You don't have a product, you need to raise investment. Okay, how do you go make money using a prototype, not MVP, again, prototype that lets you build enough traction, that lets you do things. You can always start somewhere. Anything that is more than non-zero is where you need to start. Final question, question 7. This is the same question that I ask at the end of every one of my podcast episodes, but now towards myself. What is the number one question that you are still searching for the answer to? I think the question I'm still searching for the answer to is, what is the right path forward that is going to help me build the life I want to build as quickly as possible, to shrink my timeline. There's this shrinking your timeline concept, a timeline shrinking concept that I learned about from a principle Elon Musk has. Love or hate the guy, doesn't matter. The point is that, let's say, for example, you have a 5-year timeline, goals you want to achieve in 5 years. The question is, how do you shrink that to 6 months? Now, the answer isn't going to be work 12 times harder, because unless you're currently doing nothing, that's not possible, right? The answer is going to be about prioritization. Getting rid of the crap that is non-priority, or letting it fall to the wayside, or just reprioritizing, having a clear priority at the top. And I've done my best at this, but have I done the right things? Have I got the client services and the business structure and the game plan and the ways of earning income, the business I'm building 2 businesses essentially, and the only one of them is really going to make any money or any real money, and the other is this. So, is that viable? Let's see. But I have a lot of ambitious goals, and we all need to start somewhere. Am I starting in the right place? I guess we'll find out. And that pretty much brings us to the end. I realize I didn't really answer the things I learned about podcasting, is more about the general life things I've been thinking about, partly because of the podcasting. So maybe episode 100 or something, I'll share some stuff on how I scrappily built this show, and that can be a more practical part 2 or something. I don't know, for all the budding young podcasters out there. But there are a lot more than 7 things I've learned as a result of doing this. I actually over there keep a journal with some specific stuff. So hey, there you go. Look, thank you so much for being here. If you're still at this part of the video, if you've watched all the way through, if you're a regular listener, if this is your first one, if you skipped here, doesn't matter. Because you've given me something that's infinitely valuable, which is your attention. We live in what's called the attention economy. Everyone's vying for your attention. Whatever platform you're watching this on, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Instagram, I don't know. They're all vying for your attention. I'm getting it, the platform is getting it, and it's immensely valuable. So I hope that this has been at least equally valuable back for you. And my love to you, my gratitude to you for being here, for giving me that attention. I don't know how to describe it, because I know for me that attention, because my time and my energy is sacred. Energy, especially energy, I just think is such a sacred resource. It means a lot. And so if it has been valuable, if you want the show to grow, I know everyone says like, comment, subscribe, share the episode, but genuinely, the best way you can help is by sharing this around. Shout about it. Just send it to one person. One specific episode to one person that you think has helped you learn that thing, that it would help them. That's more than I can ask. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for your time, for your energy, for being you, for wanting to go on this journey, not with me so much as for yourself, because therefore it's for whoever you're going to affect by becoming more of that leader that you are meant to be. Lots of love, and here's to your success. Take care and see you soon.